Welcome to Safety Actions monthly webinar. That was just someone letting me know it is all running and working perfectly. So this month, August, our main article that we had in our news this month that I'm going to talk to is about COVID risk management and some tips. And the tips are coming not just from Safe Work Australia and the authorities, but also from what we're seeing businesses doing, and also where businesses are starting to think about where we need to start moving forward and thinking, and what we need to be doing to prepare for what's upcoming as well, because this is going to be with us for a while. So the first tip that Stephen put in our newsletter regarding COVID risk management was about you need to have a COVID risk management plan or some sort of procedures around how you manage the risks of COVID. So this is your hygiene, your signage, whether people are at work or at home. So you need to have your procedures around what you're saying you will be doing, and also identifying your response plan if you do have someone who tests positive or shows signs and symptoms of coronavirus. So you need to have that in place as well. The other thing to think about is that everything we're doing right now, we need to build it expecting that this is likely to last for at least 3 years. And the reason we're saying you have to prepare for this to be at least 3 years is because even with vaccines starting trials already, between something going from trial to being available for public is over 2 years. So then we say 2 years or a bit more before people can publicly access this. It then has time, we then have to wait for herd immunity to build up in order for us to not have to think about, oh, someone could come into our workplace with coronavirus. So we have to plan this. Whatever actions we're putting in our COVID management plans, we need to think, can we do that for 3 years now? Because that is the likely scenario. Anything you're doing has to be able to be maintained for at least 3 years. A couple of other points on the risk, your COVID risk management plans, is to think about whether or not it's versatile for other disaster scenarios or any other future pandemics as well. So they don't have to be written for just now. They can, and just COVID, you could actually write them in a way that considers how we think about and manage other risks. So it's almost like thinking that COVID has now presented a new way to think about how we respond to events, even how we would respond to bushfires, and the idea of should people be coming to work or can they work from home. This has changed our perception on all of that, and so we need to give consideration to not just this plan but also our other emergency and disaster management scenarios and how we manage those as well. Key things to address, topics that you should have addressed in your COVID management plans is how are you managing the shutdown of your workplace, especially businesses who are Melbourne based and in stage 4 restrictions, and most people can't go to their workplace. How are you managing that? How are you enforcing that? Or how are you otherwise dealing with that? So the work from home. What do you have in place for your employees' need for leave? So if someone can't work because they do become sick with COVID, what are your clear guidelines on their leave entitlements for them? And what are your processes for ensuring the safety of your staff when working from home. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit in just a minute. If anyone's got any questions as I go, feel free to pop them in the box on your screen. There's a tab that will say questions. You can just go down, type something, and then I'll see it. The COVID management plan needs to also address your response if someone does show symptoms or you get a positive case, which also includes notifying the health department and whether or not you have a notifiable incident. So every single state has certain requirements on COVID cases being a reportable incident. So yes, you need to, and they're different for each state. Most of them are relatively the same, but they are different for each state. If you would like me to send you all a bit of clarity on that, I did a hunt around last week and did a summary somewhere, so I can find that and have that sent through to you guys if you're interested. Okay, so that's the main things on the COVID risk management plan that I think you need to make sure you've considered. There are templates available from each of the different regulators. If you're interested in one, you can also ask us. We can send that through to you as well. But just make sure it's something that works for you and it's likely to work long term, and that it covers all those key areas of what are your risks and to your business and how is your business addressing them. I wanted to touch on work from home next, because I think that's one of the next biggest issues in managing risks from COVID, and that is because working from home presents its own unique risks to businesses, which previously we used to just go, do you need to work from home, or let's limit the amount of work you do from home. We're now in a scenario where people are working from home and we expect them to continue working from home for an extended period of time, and that is for up to 3 years. And some of the businesses we're working with have now decided that working from home is probably not just going to be for 3 years. Their business is changing in such a way to adapt and allow that to be their new norm. So what do we have to do as a business to ensure the safety of our staff when they are at home? Keeping in mind their home is now their workplace, and we are still responsible for that workplace and their safety while they're in that workplace. Some of the key things to think about when we're talking working from home for the long term, and not just it's a short-term arrangement, and it's not just an interim thing that we're doing until COVID goes away, because we're talking 3 years now, is some of the key things we think are important is around having a designated workstation, and not just I have a space set up on my dining table that I'm using and then I have to pack it up on the weekend and then I pull it out again. If you're going to have people working from home for up to 3 years or forever, we need to go, they need a designated space and an office and somewhere separate from their home life, where they can go and they work and then they come back out of that space and they can do their home. The separation of work-life balance. So that's part of that, is that it's important to know that what are your business's policies and procedures around people shouldn't be working at 10 o'clock at night if their hours are 9 to 5. So what is your processes for that, and what are you telling your staff about that, and when should they work, when should they not be working? Again, this comes down a bit to the work-life balance. Mental health is going to be a very big thing, and how we manage that when we're working from home, because there's a few, I guess, new aspects that get introduced, especially with COVID, because everyone is quite isolated now. And a lot of people come to work in part for that social engagement and interaction with other people. We're now losing that. And so we need to start managing that, as well as the normal stresses that work can have, the normal stresses over, do I have enough work, not enough work? Do I have enough control of my work? Things like that. So all of that still needs to be addressed, but now we're having to address it remotely from the person. So I will talk a little bit about mental health towards the end, but it is going to become a growing concern as people work from home more. And the longer we are in isolation, the more this will become a concern. There is also risks such as abuse and alcohol that come from people being at home in isolation. And now that someone is at home and they are potentially in a scenario where they could face abuse, we now have to have procedures at work where we have a method to try and identify and assist people at risk. So things to consider that maybe you haven't thought you needed to consider about your staff working at home. That's everything I wanted to touch on from working at home. The next point I have, so if your staff aren't working at home, your staff are physically in your office or your workplace, we need to reduce the risk of COVID infection getting into our workplace, and then if it does get into our workplace, that it goes to everyone else. So maintaining control over who comes into the workplace. So number one, preventing people coming in if possible. That is, everyone works from home. And this is staff, visitors, couriers, deliveries. Recently, Stephen was on site and he told me he's at a site and everyone is wearing gloves, they're wearing masks, they're all really well protected, they're keeping their distances, and a courier comes in, he has no mask on, no gloves on, doesn't use the hand sanitizer on his way in, he goes to the drop-off point, drops his package and walks out. But now you've had someone enter your controlled environment and they have breached every single one of the controls on their way through. So making sure that if you have people who come and just drop something off, can they do it outside or at your door, or some way that we can distance them and barrier them from coming into the workplace as much as possible. Doing health checks of the people that do come in. So prevent them if possible. If they do have to come in, then we need to check their health. And then we've got the hygiene stuff that everyone is very well aware of, hand sanitizer, etc. And then once they're in the workplace, are they interacting with people, or is everyone in their own maintained personal offices or spaces? We need to make sure that when people are that potential of 1.5 meters of each other, that we have a record of who works closely or near who. And if anyone is interacting with someone for greater than 15 minutes, that we have a record that they were physically interacting with each other or within that 1.5 meters of each other. So if you have to go talk to someone from another team, then if that's going to be an interaction that takes more than 15 minutes, you need a record that that person has moved from this team to that team. I'm mentioning teams because it's a very good idea in your workplace to reduce down the number of people who have to interact with each other. One of the ways of doing this is if you're doing shift rotations where some people are in your workplace and some people are at home and then you're swapping over who's where, make sure you keep those people consistent. So rotating shifts such that the same people see the same people, but we don't have crossover between the two groups of people. And when we do have crossover, we keep a record of that. The reason for all of this is that if someone is infected, we don't want them infecting others. But if they are infected, we need to be able to identify who else may have been infected and manage that and do your mismanagement plan. So that was the first thing I mentioned you need to have, is the management plan, which should include your response procedures. Physical workplace, other things, small teams. because we're thinking of a 3-year time frame now, it's becoming a point that we need to consider rearranging our workplace. So when we're saying we need to socially distance people, if we want to have people physically in our workplace, they need to have that's greater than a 1.5 meters between them and another person, or physical barriers in place between them. So if you want people in your office or in your workplace, you need to build now to have that distancing and understand that what you're doing is not interim and it is not short term. We are doing this for 3 years, and that is why we're going to do physical changes to the workplace to have separation of our staff. Also considering in your physical workplace, break times of staff, where people go to have their breaks, and reducing those group interactions and those cross-team interactions. So it's one thing to set up different teams of people and have them in different places around the workplace. It becomes another matter when they then go to lunch in the same place. So staggering breaks, or where people designating multiple locations where people can go to maintain that separation in breaks. I've just put down, you can see on the slides, I've written down hygiene signage. It's to continue. You need to plan the hygiene and signage that people are currently doing for COVID, as we need to and are advised to by the authorities. That's going to continue for probably 3 years, and it should continue for that long. The next point I had there is monitor and review, and there's a few things when it comes to COVID risk management that you need to be monitoring and reviewing. The first one is your staff's compliance, or your visitors or your delivery drivers or whoever you have physically on site, or even and in their home workplace, their compliance to your procedures. So when people come in physically, what is your ability to monitor them and rectify and ensure compliance? And then for your staff working at home, what is your regular contact with them, and how are you ensuring they are maintaining compliance with your safety procedures whilst they're at home? So how are you checking that? The next point there under monitor and review, which I think links to compliance, is your staff's training and their level of awareness. This is going to link to a couple of things. One, it's do they know what your procedures and expectations are of them? So you need to impart that, and then I guess check and monitor that they are still aware that they haven't become complacent. So we just want to know that that is still happening. The next point is around government information, and it's constantly changing. So you need to make sure your workplace has a good system for monitoring these constant, ever-changing available information to us. But then that also needs to link to your own change management procedures and what you're doing to update your own processes, practices, and procedures to reflect the new information. Then you need to distribute that information to your staff and ensure that they have the correct level of knowledge and awareness to act appropriately on the information that has changed. I hope that made sense. So I think that was the main point on monitoring review. I think it's a big thing to think about your change management processes right now, and if they are coping with COVID right now. I think a lot of businesses, when COVID started, really went into panic mode and didn't know what to do. And it's taken a while for everyone to get back in the swing of work, and because work has suddenly changed. This links back to mental health a bit, considering that people, when things are constantly changing, there are some people who can cope with that really well, and there are some that can't. We need to make sure that our change management processes are informing and assisting those who are struggling to cope with the constant changes that we're dealing with right now. So we need to make sure that our change management processes are considering that. And then linking back, I said I wanted to talk a little bit more on mental health. Something you need to make sure your business has in place is good mental health support right now. Both when people are working from home, because like I said, they could now be feeling more isolated. They might be feeling, they might be struggling with the control over their work or their level of work, or even the ability to do their work in their home environment. We're working from home some days and not other days. And on the days that I work from home, I will inevitably be bothered by children, which is why I'm doing the webinar from the office, so you don't just get little heads popping up all the time. So that's something to consider is how are your staff coping with working from home? What are their struggles? And what can you do to help them? Is probably the good questions to ask. And so this now comes down to who in your business is responsible for maintaining contact with your staff while they're at home. And do they know, are they trained in the risks, how to identify the early warning signs of concerns? Do they know the questions to ask? And then how to respond and assist any staff that are struggling or having problems. Keeping in mind with mental health, the key is to identify things as early as possible and provide that intervention or assistance as early as possible for people that are struggling. Some other things to think about, I think, from the COVID risk management perspective is isolation of people and culture, that you are not just a problem, right, just not just a problem for people at home, they're also a problem for people at work, because even people at work are now expected to be in smaller teams and segregated from other people. So we need ways to kind of, I guess, manage that. Humans are social beings and creatures, and we're now being told you need to cut that a bit. And I also think from a safety business perspective, we're going to start finding ourselves struggling with that concept of business culture and leadership. It's really important that businesses, when you're contacting with your staff, that you are maintaining that clear presence of your business's safety values, your safety goals, your safety vision, that your staff are still hearing that, seeing that, and believing that. Because it's very easy right now to forget about doing the things that we need to do to maintain that safety mindset and that safety culture that so many businesses have spent a lot of time building. It could just all vanish because the people no longer have those interactions that we used to have. We've also changed the nature of how we interact with our staff. We're no longer interacting with our staff face to face. We are now interacting with our staff through a computer. And so we now have to have a way of, of just continuing those conversations and the things that we need to have in place for culture and cultural development, but just in a different method. So again, this comes down to our change management. How are we adapting to change is going to become very important. So let me just double check if I had anything else. Some of the key things to help with mental health support. Daily staff check-ins should be occurring by supervisor or manager, but staff need to have multiple points where they can go to raise concerns. So if they don't feel comfortable raising a concern to their direct manager or supervisor, we need to have something there for them, another way that they can let us know, and they need to be aware of that method. We need to have some sort of employee assistance program in place and that staff are aware of it. And then I think I already mentioned managers need to be trained to identify the risks, the early signs, and what other support strategies that your business has for them to use to provide to your staff. So I guess that's everything I really wanted to kind of touch on in regards to what was in our news article. But I wanted to let everyone know that Safety Action, we are still here. We are between the office and home as we need to be. We also wanted to let everyone know that we are doing COVID management reviews for a number of businesses, and if you have any interest or need in that, you can always contact us. I think it's important to remember that whatever you do and take away from today, to remember that whatever you're doing now needs to be planning for 3 years at least. If anyone wants a copy, we're currently just finalizing a fact sheet on working from home long term. So what the things I mentioned in regards to working from home, that's just a small fraction of the risks, and then how to manage those risks that we're going to put into the fact sheet. So if you would like a copy of that, just contact us either at inquiries or we don't have the email there. Either at inquiries at safetyaction.com.au, or you can email me directly at katie.weber, katie.weber, at safetyaction.com.au, and I will send you a copy of that. I have uploaded onto this webinar a copy of our August newsletter. If anyone didn't get a copy and would like a copy, again, feel free to just contact me and I can send it through to you. Other than that, thank you very much for participating in today's webinar, and it was great to have you here. So thanks very much. Bye.